One day, oceanographer Tom and his family, his wife Julia and their two children, Cassie and Ben, set off on a yacht trip in the Caribbean Sea. While Tom and Ben were busy fishing, Cassie was absorbed in her gadget. Julia decided to go for a swim. Suddenly, something unsettled her. She looked around, but the sea was as calm as ever. Still, she felt a distinct sense of dread, as if something large and dangerous was circling nearby. At the same time, the instruments on the yacht began acting strangely. Tom, preoccupied with fishing, didn't pay any attention. Meanwhile, Julia's feeling worsened, and eventually, she started to drown. She screamed, but no one heard her. The water seemed to pull her farther away from the yacht. As the situation became critical, Tom finally heard her voice. He rushed to the helm and steered the yacht toward the distant Julia. Tom dove into the water and, with the children's help, pulled her back aboard and revived her. Tom was angry because he always told Julia to notify the others when going into the water. Julia apologized, and soon the incident was forgotten. Besides, the family had a reason to celebrate. It was their son, Ben's 13th birthday. Tom lit the candles on the cake, and everyone congratulated Ben. He received gifts while Cassie took a group photo of the happy family. At that moment, Cassie's boyfriend called her. He asked about the swim, but suddenly, an intense storm began brewing in the background. Cassie was worried, but her boyfriend reassured her he was safe. Then, the connection cut off. Cassie told her parents about the storm on land, but then everyone felt jolts shaking the yacht. They rushed to the deck and saw massive whale carcasses surfacing all around them. Tom explained that sometimes whales get disoriented during storms, but these animals were pushing the yacht, threatening their safety. Tom dived into the water and soon returned injured. He had cut himself on the propeller. While trying to figure out what was going on, he discovered the yacht's shafts seemed bent, likely from a tail strike. Now they were unlikely to sail away. Later, Cassie tried to re-establish communication, but there was no signal. The radio wasn't picking up anything either. Tom began calculating their supplies. They had enough water for about 4 days, no more. But since they were on a shipping route, someone would surely find them. Suddenly, ominous sounds came from outside. When the family stepped out onto the deck, they froze in shock. Glowing objects were falling from the sky, getting closer and closer. Tom took a risk, started the engine, and managed to steer the yacht away from the next meteorite. But the engine was finally damaged. The next object fell so close they could see it was one of Earth's artificial satellites. Then, a strong wind blew, and the instruments went haywire. The terrified family hid inside the yacht as it was tossed by waves. They put on life jackets and prepared for the worst. A strange ringing sound caused nosebleeds and nausea. Tom tried to signal for help with a flare gun, but it was all in vain. The family barely survived the night. In the morning, they were relieved to find themselves alive. But there was a huge hole in the side of the yacht, and no one knew why it was still afloat. They went outside and froze in amazement. The water was gone, and their boat was standing on a rocky outcrop in the middle of a stony desert where the ocean once was. Sometime later, Tom tried to reassure his family, saying not everyone could have perished. He took measurements and realized the compass was lying. North wasn't where it was supposed to be. This meant the Earth's poles had shifted. Such a thing had happened before, long ago. It turned out the sea had retreated to where the land used to be, and most likely, humanity had perished. Cassie couldn't bear this revelation and ran to the cabin, asking to be left alone. Julia went to inventory the remaining supplies, while Ben released a bunch of colorful balloons into the sky, hoping survivors would come to their aid. Meanwhile, Tom turned on the radio and sent out distress signals. Unexpectedly, he heard a response. It was Nato, the captain of a small submersible. They had been deep underwater when the catastrophe happened. That's why they survived. But all communication systems had failed, and expecting help was futile. According to NATO's calculations, the sea would return in about a week, and it would be harsh. He advised them to find higher ground and stay there. Julia ordered the children to pack their things. Tom asked NATO if he could save their children. NATO explained the submersible was very small. Unfortunately, his partner had died, and he could only take one person. After some persuasion, Tom convinced NATO to take both children, and NATO gave him his coordinates. Tom charted a course on the map and promised to reach the location in a couple of days. The next morning, the family was almost ready to embark on their journey. Tom stepped onto the deck and suddenly saw a man with a dog approaching. The man walked toward him and greeted him, but Tom noticed the man was injured. He offered the traveler some water. The man drank it, then suddenly punched Tom in the face. Julia saw everything and rushed to her husband, but the traveler plunged a makeshift spear into Tom's chest. The dog barked at Julia, but she froze in horror, realizing there was no saving her husband. She ran to the yacht, but the man pursued her, injuring her arm. Nevertheless, Julia climbed onto the deck. The children, hearing her screams, ran to help. Together, they barricaded the doors to the cabin. Julia hid Cassie and Ben in a locker, gave her daughter the flare gun, and instructed her to shoot only as a last resort. Meanwhile, the killer tried to break down the doors and eventually succeeded. Julia hid in the back bathroom and patched up her wound. The intruder headed straight to the galley and grabbed some food. It was clear he was very hungry. Holding a can of food, the man began searching the yacht. Julia armed herself with a kitchen knife. He entered the cabin, but Julia jumped overboard and hid beneath the yacht. The killer peered through the hole but didn't see her. However, the dog attacked Julia, forcing her to kill it. The man heard the yelp, went outside, and found the dog's body. Meanwhile, Julia climbed back onto the yacht through the porthole on the opposite side, but fell straight into the killer's hands. He beat her, threw her onto a couch, and grabbed her throat, intending to strangle her. Cassie witnessed all this and realized it was the last resort. She opened the locker and fired at the man. The shot threw him aside, but the flare set the yacht on fire. Julia ordered the children to flee while she sneaked into the galley. The injured killer tried to attack again. Julia kicked him away, grabbed the packed bags, and jumped overboard, where Ben found his father's body. Cassie ran to the corpse and sobbed over it. Julia kissed her deceased husband, but, seeing the killer leap from the burning yacht, took the children and left. The boat exploded behind them. The family ran across the stony desert and soon took shelter in a rocky canyon where a stream flowed. But the water was salty and undrinkable. Cassie shared a small amount of water with her brother, but he refused to drink. The boy felt guilty, believing the killer had come because of the balloons. Cassie voiced the same thought, but Julia ordered her to stop and defended her son, explaining he didn't mean any harm. She told the children to gather themselves. A long journey awaited. Then Julia spotted the killer again, relentlessly following their trail. The family hurried onward. That evening, Ben found the carcass of a hammerhead shark and tried to butcher it, but Julia saw the pursuer and ordered the children to run. They soon came across a field of once flooded toxic waste barrels. Julia urged the children forward despite the threat of contamination, knowing the killer was still behind them. The family walked along the former ocean floor, weaving through piles of plastic and other trash dumped by humans. Soon, Julia noticed Ben was severely dehydrated and gave him the last drops of water. Cassie broke down, convinced they had no chance of survival, but Julia commanded them to keep moving. Eventually, they found the fuselage of a plane that had crashed into the sea long ago and crawled inside to rest. Julia examined the last photo of their family and recounted the story of her first meeting with Tom, which happened at her hospital, where Tom was brought with decompression sickness after a failed dive. The children wept, remembering their father and saying their final goodbyes. At night, Cassie was awakened by a noise and stepped outside to sit near the plane. Out of the darkness, the killer approached her, unaware that the girl was acting as bait. As he prepared to grab her, Julia ambushed him, stabbing the man with a knife. At dawn, the family prepared to continue their journey, only to discover the killer's body had been scavenged, a sign that something even more dangerous than humans lurked in the desert. They moved on. Julia consulted the map when Ben suddenly rushed ahead. Julia yelled for him to stop, but the boy sprinted toward a salty puddle and managed to drink a few gulps. Julia dragged him away, but the boy soon became sick. Soon they came across some plastic chairs and built a makeshift shelter from the sun, resting inside. Suddenly, Julia heard strange sounds. She stepped outside and saw something terrifying, forcing her to wake the children. Realizing the new danger, they began running. Soon they spotted a large ship in the distance, surrounded by crashed containers and a few wandering people. Julia called out to them, but seeing thousands of giant crabs, the people dashed into a container and locked the doors, ignoring her pleas for help. The three climbed onto a container, though the crabs managed to wound Julia in the leg. Nevertheless, Julia, Cassie, and Ben sat on top, watching the crabs penetrate through a crack in the doors and kill everyone inside despite their desperate attempts to fend them off. Julia tied a scarf around her leg and passed out. The next morning, she woke up alone, terrified, and called for the children. It turned out the crabs had moved on and the children had gone down to search for food and weapons. Julia cauterized her wound while Ben examined a strange glowing rock they'd found. They decided to follow a power line running through the desert, hoping it would lead to civilization. Eventually, they came upon a city covered in sand. Eventually, they found NATO's submarine. But the crabs found them again and were chasing them. Then they reached the submarine, but NATO was injured. And they had to abandon him, and the three of them boarded the submarine. Suddenly, the sea rose and took the submarine with it, and the waves and the sea were so strong that they all fainted. The next day, when they woke up and saw their surroundings, they realized that they had to face an unknown future and live in the ruins of the world. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Vision Movie Recap. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.